Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world listening to this podcast. My name is David Caspilla with Comerit, and today I'm joined by Robert Godfrey, and we are super excited to have him on. I'm going to try to exit my cat here, stage left, so give me a moment. How's it going, Robert?
Going well. How are you doing, Dave?
You're going to hear me potentially flip on and off to mute because got a small cough I came back with. It's an actual cold. Those exist still.
Yeah, yeah, no.
Yeah, so I got like a cold, a little cough. But hey, thanks for taking out time and joining us today. I really was excited to get you on here and talk about your background because I think there's going to be some future episodes that we're going to be doing here that are going to be mind blowing.
That'd be cool. Yeah,
There's
exciting.
there's very few people that I think are fortunate enough to work across many industries, but also technologies, going all the way from big, deep enterprise like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, that kind of stuff, and going all the way to the far reaches of artificial intelligence, geospatial, and even, yep, our favorite Web3 blockchain. So those are all topics we'll be able to treat our audiences to here in the very, very near future. But before we do that, I wanted to get them introduced to you and talk a little bit about your background, how you got into what you're doing, what you're up to, and we'll let you get started. And like normal, I'll probably have a lot of questions for you. What,
Okay, cool.
so why
Yeah.
don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in technology and what you do today specifically?
Okay. Man, where did I get started?
Yep,
How I got involved? It's a winding route in a way, but why not just kind of start at the beginning and walk through?
let's do it.
Yeah, the very beginning was a field called, I was in college and I was stayed on as a research assistant with a fluvial geomorphology professor. Okay. So what's that? Right? That's the study of river systems and how they change. And so we were using geospatial technology. This is way back in the day. ArcGIS had AML, and that was command line. And we were tracing river systems from aerial imagery, satellite imagery. And that gets tedious really fast. And so I started to get into how am I going to automate this, right? Because even to this day, I can see river systems like the networks on a map in my head because I was tracing them by hand. And I'm like, okay, I got to make my life easier. So how am I going to automate this? And I started to play around and figured out with the command line, I could read those images into matrices and feed those in and then get the data that way. That started this whole journey of next steps. Like that job led into a position with environmental sciences, like a government agency doing analytics, trying to understand environmental loading of nutrients to river systems, right? And built that understanding of data and the automation, right? Because you're just constantly working with data. And that led to jumped into the railroad industry and started learning about linear reference systems. You mentioned Oracle version databases. That was some interesting stuff. And then there I got my first taste of SAP and understood, hey, what's SAP all about? And this was early 2000s. And so, no, that controls all of the core enterprise data for this Fortune 100 I was working with. Okay, that's something I want to know more about, right? What can we do with that? And that led to more data analytics and tying. What's interesting is I think the theme from my career has been like how do enterprises use this operational data, and you have your core data that is understood, right? Like financials and HR and master data and supply chain. But then there's these data that corporations want to use to become bleeding edge, right? What's the new stuff? Like, and this is stuff like geospatial, like being in the geospatial industry, like for many years, it was you had to explain it. We were like the in the basement, right? Getting that secondary. But now I think people are starting to understand, hey, I need to know what my assets are. Where are they going? And how do you combine that with your core data, your financials and things, and try to get that leading edge understanding and insight that maybe your competitors haven't gotten yet?
All right, so let me do this. One of these days, we're gonna have to come back and talk about rivers. I think there's some stuff
Okay.
there. Let's be honest, we're streaming data nowadays, right? So
Yes.
streams, rivers. I think there's some analogies that we might glean from that.
I can get very philosophical with the analogies of networks and stream
Exactly.
networks. Yes.
But you know what I'm really curious about though right now is because it's very so I had a similar an interesting experience where I set out to become a medical doctor. I
Uh,
graduated out of UC Davis and I thought that's what I wanted to do. But turn of events occurred and somehow I end up working with SAP. That's a whole nother story we can get into. But what was that thing? Like, how did all of a sudden, like, I can talk about SAP very passionately now today, but it's like at some point you were studying rivers and different components. And at some point you're like, you know what? I'm very excited about data. Like, what gives and what's so important and exciting about data?
it's the theme across any effort, right? It goes back to that. There's the old saying of, "Oh man, I'm gonna murder it." One of the fathers of data governance, he said, "If it comes from God, good, but anybody else bring data," right? And a lot of the folks in this industry, so what we'll see, I would just like executives, right? You want to know, am I doing better than I did yesterday? How are you going to tell unless you have some sort of logic, some sort of ability to capture and track the things that you care about? And it doesn't matter. Like you were talking about the human body, right? What do? We get on the scale in the morning. Did I eat more? Okay, why do I weigh more or less? What's my waist size? These things are important, and these things we track. We like people use data every day, even if they're not thinking about it, right? They want to know how they turn on the radio or they check the news. Like, how long's my commute? What time is it? And these are the things that like we think about day in and day out and capture. And there are all these data points like time and going back to a company, like your costs and your margins, right? And you're going to want to know, like, at this point in time, where was I? And was I doing as I expected or not? And if I'm not, then why? And then, so talking about networks, right? That's that tracking out from that data point to the business processes that generated it.
I remember someone said to me, this was many years ago, like, whatever you do, son, s- do something within data. I'm like, why? He goes, data's king. Now, back then, I was like, what is it? Data's king? I don't get that. Today, now, we're tracking everybody's data. We track what you say on your Alexa, on your Siri, when you click here, when you
Right.
smile at an image, when you cross the video, the IoT cameras in front. Data is truly now when he's that statement now rings something totally different to me. Data is king. Everything is data, right? Everyone's was like, oh, wait, you have that data on this group of people? How much can I buy it for? And then you've got whole nation states willingness like, hey, you know what? I understand this company over here. I know they're a US based company, but we'll give you billions of dollars for that data. Why would you do something like that? When I think about data as king, it truly is something at a whole nother level. And we can get into all kinds of stuff about data, 23andMe data, DNA data, that sort of thing.
Right.
But when it comes to enterprise data, a lot of the clients I speak to, it's still a huge mystery. I wouldn't say that data science is a new phenomenon, but it's still fairly new. And it's almost like data wizardry. If they have the proper tools and the environment and things coming together, you can really ask some crazy questions. Really amazing questions that could have massive impacts on, say, let's say you have a process that's $600 million a month in process. And if you save 3%, right? My
There
math's
you
not
go.
that great. That's $1.8 million a month, I believe. And I've
Right.
actually seen that kind of changes. But again, there's so many opportunities here. And when what someone with your background, you've got to work across multiple industries. What can you tell me or describe me a challenge that was you were presented with, and based upon all these years now that you spent actually helping clean data, enable data, what major challenge were you able to solve for some major enterprise or some organization? What was the problem? Why did they have to call you in, Robert?
It's funny when you say that because I've gone down that route of analytics, right? But every organization that I was hired for to do advanced analytics, you know what I'm saying? Like one organization, like we're gonna make the trains fully simulated so that we knew where assets were before they were placed, and we run the trains on a simulated network. And if it didn't work, we need to roll that back. It sounds awesome. Have it in dimensions, not only in X, Y, but Z and M, like fourth dimension of where the trains would go. And then the other thing we were looking into with a different client was, can we use drones and satellites to be able to reduce costs and know exactly how much we were producing out of the field, where pests were, where they might appear again. Those were all really awesome things, like you're
Those are
saying.
real things, huh?
But the theme and the constant challenge is getting the data to a state where you can get to that. And it's not even that. It's like those are really cool. You can do proof of concepts. You have to really control your data, but it's that cliche. 80% of the time, your data engineers are working on getting the data to a good state, to these usable data products, so that you can even start to do analytics. So you say like the challenge that's been through my career, it's getting in there and working with the business and then building out that foundation that you can then use to build out some of these more interesting and advanced analytics that gets you ahead of your competitors.
Yeah, and one thing I found that was interesting about being in this space is you don't know what you don't know. It's cliche to ask that, but really in data, did you know if we did this, you could ask this crazy question? And it
Right.
gets really crazy, like you said. Should we spray a little bit more for these insects or get to this kind of stuff, right? You impact production or increase revenue by percentages in these mass amounts, or you save a process because some geographic understanding. These are big things, and people don't realize. And we're talking millions of dollars over a 1% or 2% change. So
It is. It's yeah. It's awesome to see, right? That
it really is.
your effort that you're like, oh, how much am I affecting the bottom line here? Or like how much cost that's you hear like 1%, but then you apply it to the cost across the organization. You're like, okay, and that's the stuff. I've been in a position where it's like, what is the data team doing? And you could get those stats, show that to the CFO. CFO's like, keep going.
I think part of the challenge that I see when I talk to other CFOs and I talk to other executives is that there's so many opportunities now. Okay, I can use all these different clouds and I can move my data over to any number of these clouds, and all of them have fantastic advanced analytics tools that are built right in. And this one works really well with our SAP system. This one does not. This one doesn't care what system. How do any board executive members make decisions with so many tools? What has to happen, and how do you deal with that when there's every vendor's out there selling? They've got the best of breed, or they've got some special big query, and I have to tell you, I've never seen this many opportunities, but how do you deal with that?
It's funny you say that because you've watched the industry. You're right. Like, everybody is promoting their tool, right? And their tool can do it all. But maybe it's also now we've been seeing it lately. It's for a very specific piece of that pipeline. And you said it, right? You have executives like the CFO, the CEO. They see the potential for all these opportunities, but they know they need data and they need somebody that understands data to get in there. And that's the rise of the CDO, right? That chief data officer, or he's like sometimes chief analytics officer. I think that's important, right? Is having someone that has been through the process of building data foundations, seeing like business process create data, business people create data. But when you want to create a foundation for analytics, it takes a specific skill set. And those of us that have been doing it, like we've seen all the tools, right? And so it's a balance of having that knowledge from the trenches, if you will, and then also rising and being able to speak to the business. It's so important to be able to understand the business and understand the business process, because every business is different. Even if they're in the same industry, internally they're going to run differently. And so that's one of the most important things. And then, what's the team that you have? What are they capable of? And if need to, what are the tools they can use? What are they already invested in? Because that's how you get, efficiently moving and showing that value.
I think there's a very key point you made here. So in the last, I know this is dating myself, I've said it on a number of podcasts, but over 25 years, I've got to work with incredible expertise. Some just amazing in terms of their programming skills and what have you. I think one of the things you mentioned that's a major differentiator is not just having that technical development skill, but that ability to articulate the nuances and the things that are going on and be able to speak to the business, things that you may not think of. Maybe it's from a different industry or maybe it's in the same industry, but because you're a consultant, you're not just an employee at this one location, you've learned lots of best practices and things. You may have tested things and said, I've done that, might not want to do that. But I think I have to bring this up because I feel very fortunate that I've been able to surround myself with people like you, Robert, Matt, Barry, and there's quite a few others that they're not just a technical person in nature, but a real value add is the ability to collaborate on what's going on. It's a lot different. I've seen projects, I've been on thousands of projects, literally. And the biggest challenges, though, is that you'll get phenomenal programmers, but they just didn't spend that time to really try to understand what the real problem was. But they had the solution.
I'm with you 100%, right? I've seen it. I've worked with those people. I may have even been there early on, but that was one of the keys is you can build this. I've said this to others. You can build very cool advanced algorithms, right? That could potentially be very useful to business. But I've seen where if you don't know how to speak the language of the business, it just may not come across, right? You're speaking a different language. If I'm talking to you about, oh, I've optimized this model and it's now 1% more accurate. Okay, what does that mean? But if I tell you, like you said, I can save you 1% of your costs organization wide, now you've got the CFO's ears, you got the CEO's attention.
So let me ask you again, how long have you been in the consulting role? I know you've been helping lots of organizations, but how long have you been really playing more of the role that where you're helping talk through challenges, collaborating with the key executives and what have you?
Man, it's been a while now. I'd have to say at least, I'm being very specific, like 10, 15 years of that level.
That kind of interaction. So I want to ask, okay, so first of all, let me do a little time check. We have about 8 minutes left in this podcast. And sometimes I can get carried away because my brain thinks of all these great ideas to ask you. And if there's something you want to talk about, let's talk about that. But my question I have for you is, where do you see things going in 2023, 2024 in terms of your expertise?
My expertise. Okay.
You can also talk about future tech too, but yeah, I'd like to know.
Well, that's like
You talk about your expertise and where things are going.
What they tie together. What I'm seeing in the industry, and I'm excited to see it, is the talk around data contracts, the talk around data-centric AI. So why is that exciting? Exciting because as like the industry we're navigating, right? And so the pendulum swings, right? You'll see a lot of effort on, I can just throw more compute at this problem. But don't worry about the data. Just feed data in and we'll throw more compute at it, we'll figure it out. But I'm seeing a lot of that conversation on let's be efficient and think about the business. It's a whole data mesh. Data mesh is decentralized, if you will, back to the owners of the data. It's this focus on getting to the basics. I call it the basics. It's not basic at all. It's rather hard. It's difficult of understanding your data, getting it to a good quality so that you can get that feed into your analytical systems. That's I think one of the leading data scientists is coined that term data-centric AI. It just means going back to making sure you have good quality data. And so where do I fall into that? Jeez, you're speaking my language. That's if I go and I talk to someone at the C-level or the client, let's get in there and let's understand your data producing processes and start there. And then we'll build out these data products. And then we've all heard the Gartner Analytics Ascendancy ladder, right? Where you go, hey, what can I tell what happened? And then can I tell you why it happened? And then I go into predictive and then prescriptive, right? Where your data scientists, your business intelligence, they're sitting at that table making decisions and charging ahead. That's a foundation. It's a ladder, but you've got to be able to build it. It's more like a pyramid, right? You got to get there. So it's continuing to refine my skills, right? In that area, I think that will provide the most value for everyone.
And I'm sure you have a lot, but if you were to narrow it down, hey, this is a really important topic. We should discuss this on our next podcast. One or two, what do you think are critical for big enterprise organizations running either Oracle or SAP or some other massive transactional system? Maybe they're on prem, or maybe they are considering going over to the cloud so they can take advantage of some of the new tools. Don't let me influence you. Just top of your head, you're watching things. What are you thinking?
I've seen these organizations, and there's been a lot of focus on data engineering, which is extremely important. But I see a lot of orgs have been throwing bodies at it, if you will. Why? Because we have these very code-heavy, Spark-based platforms, and it had value. But we're seeing now the tools that they've been out there, and it's low code. Now, when I was younger, I'd be like, no, I can code it all and I can do it way better. But now I've been on the scene, like there's value in being able to use a low code transformation tool, right? And get a team that focuses on the data modeling and interacting with the business, right? And then being able to build in your logging, your error checking it there, right? That's the thing, we're advanced. We figure stuff out manually. And then we were like, all right, how can I automate that? Okay, now how can I wrap that in a tool? That's the reason like tools like SAP came around. Like I say tools, but right, it's its own platform, a suite of tools that have been combined. And then you have Snowflake. And so being able to take that data, not only from SAP, but all these other rich data sources that are ancillary, right? Again, the geospatial, the behavioral data coming from your marketing team, being able to integrate the output from the data scientists back in and merge it with your core data and be able to do that's going to be something that's going to be a big focus for this year.
Right. I'm going to have to thank Caitlin at this point. Caitlin's been running our back end on this podcast right now. But Caitlin, there's probably some good notes out of there that we'll have to say, you know what, let's focus on this one for our next podcast. But for any of you out there listening, if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them down. But we've got a long schedule of different technical experts and clients that we're going to be speaking to over the next few months, and it should be really fun. And we're always open to topics. If you're thinking or working on something that's been challenging, or you want to hear us talk about it from our best practices and expertise in the field, please leave us a comment. Robert, thank you very much for joining us. I'm super excited to talk to you about there's a lot of topics I want to cover.
I know we left a little bit of teaser, so
we
should dive into that next.
But we are going to go through some heavy duty stuff. I think the interesting thing is I think the listeners there's going to be times when people want to get into technical nitty gritty, and we might have to have a technical nitty gritty call. But I'm also hoping to attract people that are really trying to explore, look at these are the investments I've had to make as an enterprise organization. And these are tools being presented or sold to me right now. What's most important? How do I prioritize these things? So I want to have those conversations because we're actively doing that for clients now. It's like, how do I pick where do I start? And how do I get some wins early so I can prove out what it is I'm working on? At the end of the day, it's like I want better outcome. I want better insights.
There you
And
go.
our team, you're part of a phenomenal team of people and of our thought leadership that are doing these kinds of exercises and workshops for people to really help them prioritize. Here's how your organization can prioritize their tasks, their projects, and their budgets so they can see true impact and outcome immediately. But again, Robert, thank you so much. Look forward to our next conversation.
Looking forward
And
to it.
all right, we'll talk to you again real soon.